Children's Church. Just follow Miss Terry. And thank you again to everyone for putting up with my awful singing. For those of you who want to follow along in your Bibles, we're reading today from 2 Samuel chapter 16, starting in verse 23, and going through to the 16th verse of chapter 17. Don't anybody panic, it's like the last verse of 16 and then the rest is all 17, so it's not that super long a passage. Of course, I will give you guys time to catch it up. I don't seem to hear any more page flipping. If you're not there yet, now's the time to stop me before I start reading. No objections, so here we go. Now in those days, the advice that Ahithophel gave was like that of one who inquires of God. That was how both David and Absalom regarded all of Ahithophel's advice. Ahithophel said to Absalom, I would choose 12,000 men and set out tonight in pursuit of David. I would attack him while he is weary and weak. I would strike him with terror, and then all the people with him will flee. I would strike down only the king and bring all the people back to you. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed. This plan seemed good to Absalom and to all the elders of Israel. But Absalom said, summon also Hushai the Archite, so we can hear what he has to say as well. When Hushai came to him, Absalom said, Ahithophel has given this advice. Should we do what he says? If not, give us your opinion. Hushai replied to Absalom, the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men. They are fighters, and as fierce as a wild bear robbing her cubs. Besides, your father is an experienced fighter. He will not spend the night with the troops. Even now he's hidden in a cave or some other place. If he should attack your troops first, whoever hears about it will say, there's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom. Then even the bravest soldier, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt with fear. For all Israel knows that your father is a fighter, and those with him are brave. So I advise you, let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, be gathered to you with you yourself leading them into battle. Then we will attack him wherever he may be found, and we will fall on him as dew settles on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we will drag it down to the valley, until not so much as a pebble is left. Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than that of Ahithophel. For the Lord had determined to frustrate the good advice of Ahithophel in order to bring disaster on Absalom. Hushai told Zadok and Abiathar the priests, Ahithophel has advised Absalom and the elders of Israel to do such and such, but I have advised them to do so and so. Now send a message at once and tell David, do not spend the night at the fords in the wilderness. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. So, does anybody have any idea what just happened? I mean, to be honest, this passage seems a little out there. It does make sense, however, if you understand the circumstances that lead up to this passage and some of what takes place after it. Now, the trouble that this passage is a part of starts years before. David is ruling as king of Israel. He's got many sons by many different wives. The two oldest are Amnon and Absalom. Now, Amnon is the oldest of all of David's sons. He's the crown prince, the heir to the throne. Absalom's the second oldest, means he's second in line to the throne. And frankly, Absalom doesn't like that. Absalom wants to be king after David dies. But Amnon's in his way. Not to mention, the fact is, quite simply, Absalom despises Amnon. Now, Amnon and Absalom are only half-brothers, but Absalom had a full-blooded sister by both David and his mother. A sister that Amnon raped. Now, that caused a great rift between the two brothers. Absalom absolutely hated Amnon, now for two reasons instead of just one, and Absalom was bound and determined to get rid of Amnon. So what he does is he throws this big party and invites David to attend. Of course, Absalom knew full well that David would not be able to come to this party, but the custom in those days was when the king himself could not accept an invitation, he'd send a representative in his place. Amnon, as crown prince of Israel, would have been prime candidate to be this representative. And so everything plays out just like Absalom wants. Amnon comes representing David. Amnon gets good and drunk. I mean, the guy is a well-known greedy pig, to be honest. And as soon as Amnon is well and truly drunk, Absalom kills his brother. Now, a lot more took place before and after this, but that was kind of the starting point of the troubles that took place in our passage. This leads up to an open rebellion by Absalom against David. Now, David gets wind that Absalom is marching on Jerusalem with this huge army of followers. David's a good tactician. He realizes that if Absalom actually does attack the city, he and his forces will likely take Jerusalem. David's not willing to risk the lives of the men who would sacrifice themselves in basically a lost cause. So what David does instead is he gathers together all of his loyalists, and in the dead of night, they make a break for it. They abandon Jerusalem to fight another day. Now, several people actually attempted to go with David, but some of them were not granted that permission, or granted that honor, so to speak. Amongst them was a man named Hushai. If you'll remember our passage, that's one of the main characters. Hushai the Archite. Now, Hushai, he's an old man. He can't fight, and frankly, he'd likely slow down the whole caravan. We can put the whole caravan at risk that way. So David goes to Hushai, who's asked to come with him, and says, I'm sorry you can't come with us, but I have another job for you to do right here. Be my spy in Absalom's camp. Hushai is actually known as a very wise man. He has faithfully served David as a counselor and advisor for years now. He's actually a very close friend of the king's. So David knows he can trust Hushai to look out for him in enemy territory. So David and his company move on. Hushai stays in Jerusalem. Absalom comes, and he and his forces take the city without a fight. And Absalom buys Hushai's story about wanting to switch sides, about wanting to be on the winning side. So Absalom makes sure that the city is well and truly under his control, and then he gets all of his advisors together to see what he should do next. At the forefront of Absalom's advisors was a man named Ahithophel. Try saying that 3 times fast. Now, Ahithophel is known far and wide as a wise man, regarded in many cases as the wisest man in Israel. We honestly don't know a whole lot more about him than that, but this man is considered so wise that the advice he gives is considered as good as if God himself had spoken. So as the chief advisor here, Ahithophel speaks first. He gives Absalom this advice. Go after David now. Take 12,000 men, get him now before he has a chance to rest, before he has a chance to get himself ready. But only target David. Spare as many of his men as you can. Because once David's dead, you're heir to the throne. There's not going to be a reason to fight any further. You can take the crown with little bloodshed. It'll be an easy victory for you. Make sure this gets done properly. Let me do this for you. That's the advice of Ahithophel. Absalom listens to this advice and everyone else with him. They think this is fantastic. This is good stuff. Let's do this kind of stuff. And honestly, this is a major blow to David if they do listen. And Ahithophel's the wisest man in the kingdom. If Absalom actually listens to him, it's pretty much curtains for David. But God moves Absalom's way of thinking so that Absalom wants a second opinion just to be sure that this is the right thing to do. And the man he asks for that second opinion is Hushai. Hushai sees his chance and he goes for it. Hushai knows Absalom, and he's aware that Absalom is a very vain man. I mean, elsewhere in the Bible, we've learned that Absalom lets his hair grow for years at a time and only cuts it because it gets too heavy for his head. No offense to any guys in the room with long hair, but I'm not entirely sure that that was just a matter of laziness. That seems a lot of vanity for one guy, letting your hair grow that long. So Hushai plays on that vanity. He tells Absalom and everybody with him that Ahithophel's advice, it's only good for Ahithophel. And everybody knows that David is used to fighting on the run. He spent years running away from King Saul, the previous king of Israel, and he did that with an entire army. This guy knows how to use the terrain to his advantage. He knows how to avoid a fight when he wants to, and how to use the terrain to fight half the battle for him when he does. On top of that, chances are good that he's already got an ambush waiting for you to just chase after him so he can slaughter your forces. That's what Hushai is telling Absalom. I mean, this is not a good thing to do. Furthermore, Hushai suggests that what Absalom should do is wait. Gather together as many soldiers as possible from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south. Gather as many from all over Israel. Then chase after David and wipe not only him out, but all of his followers. Don't leave anyone who supports the previous king behind. And anyone offers help to David, be it a city, be it a person, get rid of them as well. Don't leave any David loyalists alive. And to make sure it gets done properly, you, Prince Absalom, should be the one who leads this charge and take all the glory. Absalom, I mean, you'd think Absalom would know better. He's been in fights before. Anyone who knows anything about tactics can tell you that Ahithophel's advice is better. An easy victory, little bloodshed, a quick takeover. But what Hushai's suggesting, not only is that going to be a more difficult fight because you got to wait to get your own soldiers together, you're giving your enemy time to prepare themselves for this fight. That's a tactical boo-boo, if anything. On top of that, though, remember that Israel is a tribal nation. There's very close ties between people in the same tribe. If Absalom goes and slaughters all of David's men, most of whom are from the tribe of Judah, He's going to alienate that whole tribe, one of the most powerful in all of Israel. Not to mention, he'd likely also alienate Benjamin, which often did whatever Judah told it to do. Not to mention, he'd alienate the tribe of whatever men helped David, because they're going to take out any loyalists to the king as well. But all Absalom hears is that if he follows Hushai's advice, he gets all the glory. Remember, Ahithophel had said, I would do such and such. That can also be translated as, let me lead this expedition to make sure it goes right. If Absalom follows Ahithophel's advice, Ahithophel gets the glory. If Absalom follows Hushai's advice, Absalom gets the glory. That's all that Absalom really cares about. He goes for Hushai's idea, hook, line, and sinker. Remember, maybe he said hook, line, and stinker. So Absalom, he sends word out to everyone in Israel, come to my aid, and we will wipe out David and his forces. But while he's doing that, Hushai goes to other people in the city that are still loyal to David. The priests, Zadok and Abiathar. These two men had actually tried to go with David as well. But David told them their place was with the Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred relic in Israel, and the Ark's place within the capital of Jerusalem. But they couldn't help him by being prepared to send word to him of any trouble that came. So Hushai goes to the priests, he lets them know everything that's going on, and tells them to get word to David to not stop until he gets across the Jordan River. Once there, he's out of Absalom's reach, and he can get his men ready for a fight. So the priests, they get their sons, and they send them off to let David know. And frankly, this ploy of Hushai's, it likely saved David's life. I mean, not only does David get away, but once he's across the Jordan, people come who are loyal to him, and even though they don't join his army, they give his soldiers the food and supplies they need. So David's got a chance to rest, he's got a chance to prepare, and he doesn't even have to worry about supplying his men. It's been taken care of. So when Absalom does come and attack David, it ends badly for Absalom. David and his men, they use the terrain against Absalom's forces. God himself joins the battle by sending wild animals against Absalom's army. And Absalom himself is killed after he gets that long hair he's so proud of tangled in a tree. Now, if Absalom had just listened to Ahithophel, he likely would have won the fight. He likely would have taken the crown. But instead, through the work of a man that God made sure was in the right place at the right time, God's chosen king was saved, and the prince's own death ended this rebellion. So we see that this passage actually records a pretty important exchange. It tells us the fate of God's, or one that affects the fate of God's chosen king. But what does this have to do with us? I mean, to be honest, lessons seem a bit more prominent in the parts of the story that come before this particular exchange or right after. This just seems like a part you could easily overlook. So what exactly do we learn from this? I had to spend some time with this passage to figure out what the lesson was. After a while, I realized there were a couple of different lessons, but what I really want to focus on today is what we learn from the actions of Hushai. Now remember, Hushai is an old man. He can't fight. In Fact is, he's old enough that he would slow the whole caravan down. And that would probably have ended in disaster. But this is a man that deeply loves his king and wants to serve him. I mean, when David first meets up with Hushai, Hushai tears his clothes. In the Bible, that is a sign of great grief and mourning. Hushai is upset that his king has to abandon the city. He wants to follow this man that he so deeply cares for to help him in any means possible. Even if not with the army, at least as part of David's entourage, one of his advisors, one of the people that help him get stuff done. But remember, David, he's very blunt about this, honestly. He goes up to Hushai and says, I'm sorry, my friend, you'd be useless in a fight and you're just going to slow us all down. You can't come with us. Hushai must have been devastated when he heard that. I mean, he wants to help, but he's told very blatantly that he's just going to get in the way. He had to have felt, or at the very least been tempted to feel, utterly useless. I mean, we've all been there, right? We wanted to help do something, but we've been told that we just get in the way, or we couldn't do anything to help. And how many of you have actually felt useless in a moment like that? But we learn from Hushai that we are never useless in God's plan. He couldn't be part of David's army or his entourage. He couldn't be in the limelight, so to speak, where all the glory would be. But he still had a role he could fill. Hushai is one of the few men in the kingdom that's capable of going toe-to-toe with Ahithophel in the ways of wisdom. One of the few men even close to as highly regarded as Ahithophel as a wise man. Hushai also knows Absalom, knows him well enough that he can manipulate the young prince, and he can do so without people realizing that he's even doing it. Or at least everyone except for the most astute. Not to mention, Hushai is a very close friend of the king, and he's proven to be trustworthy in the past. He is one of the few men that can be trusted to look after the interests of King David, even while entrenched in the enemy camp. In many ways, Hushai is the best man for the job to serve as David's spy. A role that, quite frankly, gets overlooked, but was just as vital as one of David's soldiers. Now put yourself in Hushai's shoes for a minute. If you'd attempted to follow David and been turned away to do a different task than what you'd expected or what you felt you needed to be doing, how would you have reacted? Would you have done as David asked you to do? Or would you have put up a fight? Would you have kicked and screamed and been a brat about it? Maybe would you have sulked about it because you couldn't be where you felt you needed to be? But the fact is, everybody has a role to play in God's plan. The issue is that most of us fail to realize and recognize we're already playing out that role because we don't think God's going to use us where we already are. And we think that God's going to use us by sending us somewhere else or by putting us in a special position. When we think of God using people, we think of him using pastors, evangelists, missionaries, world leaders. We think of him using about the people that are in the limelight that can get stuff done out in the open. But let me ask you this. How often do we actually think about God using people like janitors, the grocery store. How often do we think about God using people like that? And let me just be blunt about it. How often do we actually think about God using us, where we already are? It's not often, is it? And you think, if God's going to use me, He's going to send me overseas as a missionary. He's going to send me to seminary to learn to be a pastor. He's going to send me somewhere other than where I already am. But that completely misses the point. Imagine now what might have happened if Hushai had had the mindset that we just discussed. If Hushai had thought, if I'm not at the king's side, either as part of his army or as part of his entourage, there's no point in me doing anything. I'm utterly useless elsewhere. An attitude like that could have cost David his life. Hushai was just where he needed to be in order to fulfill his role in God's plan. God wanted him to be there to save the king and seal the fate of this rogue prince. But in order to do that, Hushai had to accept the fact that his role was in the background, in the shadows, if you will. He wasn't out in front being in the limelight. He was behind the scenes doing his job. And if he'd been anywhere else, things could have ended in disaster. Everything could have gone wrong. Absalom may have listened to Ahithophel's advice, and that would have been the end for David and his men. And that would have thrown everything off in God's plan. Instead, Hushai accepted the fact that he was not meant to be in the limelight, that he didn't need to go anywhere else for God to use him. His place was in Jerusalem, hiding in the shadows as a spy. Because of this, because he accepted that God could use him where he was in a background role, so to speak, he was able to successfully fulfill God's plan for him. Now we see what God was able to do with Hushai. When Hushai was looking for God to use him where he already was. Now think about what God can do when we expect him to use us where we are. Everybody has a role to play in God's plan. And the beauty of that is we often don't have to change where we are in order to fulfill that role. Now, that's not a blanket statement. There are a few circumstances where a change is required. But for the most part, as long as we're trying to live our lives for God and trying to fulfill our role in his plan, he's often going to use us where we already are. Maybe instead of sending you off to a missionary overseas, the people he wants you to reach out to are the ones right next door. Maybe it's your co-workers that are having a rough time right now. Maybe instead of being a preacher on Sunday morning, he intends for you to share your faith on a day-to-day basis with those that you see need it. God will use us where we already are. It's just a matter of changing our mindset from when is God going to send me elsewhere to do my role, and a matter of how has God put me here to fulfill my role in his plan. It's a major mind shift, I'll admit. But that's the way of it. It's not about going elsewhere. It's about being right where you are at the right time and being ready for God to use you at said Dear Lord, we thank you again for being in your house today. We ask that you help us to realize that you've got us where you want us. Admittingly, some of us might have a slight change coming in our future, but help us to recognize that a change is not necessary to fulfill our role in your plan. Open our eyes to see what it is you want us to be doing. Teach us how to fulfill our role where you already have us. And help us to accept that our role may not be out in the open, but may be more in the background. In your name we pray. Amen. Go in the knowledge that God has a role for you to play in his plan, and he's already working